In this series, I want to talk a little about general tricks you could use for composing, arranging, mixing, and producing your own tracks. And therefore, I want to go through a few that I made and share with you the ideas that I used in certain situations. Therefore, I want to take some tracks, and there will be various kinds of music genres. So I want to talk about like pop music or rock music, and a little bit about electronic dance music, but also probably a little folky or jazzy or even some classical ideas. Some of these ideas are, of course, not tied to a certain genre. It's just ideas you could use for whatever genre it is you're working on right now. So all of these tracks I want to talk about you can also find as EP or album on my homepage, and if you want to, you can download them as full album or single tracks. I will leave a link in the description, and you can find all these in the media section on my homepage. The first track is kind of a pop track, but in a very sparse manner. It's basically guitar and vocals. For some parts I also used some brass, like for the intro and outro and the chorus, but it's just very basic. Something I wanted to show you was an idea that is very common nowadays, and for that you would give the vocals some more texture by sending the vocal information to another track, and on that track I also have some white noise or other noise, and I use the vocal track as a guide to open and close the other track where the white noise is on. So every time the vocalist sings, there would also be some of this noise under the vocals, so it gives the vocals a little bit a different feel. And that is how I did it. So here's my vocal tracks, and in my send effects you see I have sent some of my vocal track as a like side chaining function to two other tracks, and that are these two. And on these I basically have a noise generator or a vinyl crackle, and that is working all the time. So when I deactivate my noise gate, and pull my level up, then you can hear that there is constantly noise going on this track. But since I have the gate on it, nothing happens, and the track, both of the tracks are basically just quiet. Then I go back to my vocal track and send effect to these two tracks, and on my gate I have a sidechaining activated, and that means that I have input level but no output level, so the track is silent. But since I have the sidechaining activated, and on my vocal track I have level sent to that track and to that sidechain, that means that as soon as the singer starts singing, the gate will open and you will hear the noise.
You're sweet and soft as a warm breeze.
So you see over here, and also here in the state LED, you can see that it turns to green and opens, and here you can see you have output level on the gate. It is opening as soon as the singer sings, and when she stops, so in the pauses, the gate will close.
Like we felt on summer day.
So it's just very soft. You can almost not hear it if I'm soloing these.
Skin seems bright as a sunset.
Then you can hear, if you have good speakers or headphones, then you can hear that there is a difference to when I mute the two noise tracks.
Skin seems bright as a sunset.
There is a slight difference.
Skin seems bright as a sunset.
So one more time, I just pulled the level of the white noise and the other noise track a little up so that the difference would be more obvious, but still in the background.
Skin seems bright as a sunset.
I think right now you can hear it pretty clear, but when the other instruments ring along, then it will be less obvious, and like I said, it's more of a texture than an actual effect that you would hear really clear. The other idea that I used here is also pretty standard for a pop track, and it's called vocal throws. It's also not very difficult to realize it. So what I did as well, you see here, I sent some of my vocal level to a delay effect. And I used a preset that I liked and tweaked the buttons so it would fit more my track. And what happened is that right now you can see I wrote some automation for my vocals, and right now the delay is muted for the front phrase, but for the back phrase it is switched on. And since I have it synchronized to my time base, what happens is the singer sings a phrase, and after the phrase there is a long pause, and in this long pause the delay sounds like a real repetition of that phrase. So that sounds like this.
You're as sweet and soft as a warm breeze, like we felt on summer days. Your skin seems bright as a sunset.
So I tweaked the delay a little, and I used some lo-fi filtering and a little bit of bit reduction, kind of a distortion, so that the delay would sound softer but also a little bit less clear and natural than the real voice. Another thing I did here, which I think fits really well, is in the first verse you would basically hear guitar and vocals like this.
Like we've seen it in summer days.
And to bring in a little difference, and the whole track is really soft, I used a few more small details to keep it interesting over the whole time. One thing is, like I said, I have a little brass that's coming in later, and also I used some vinyl crackling for the post-chorus and the intro and outro, so that there's another texture coming in. And for the second verse I played a synth, and it's playing a simple bass line, and it's really low and soft, but I also used some effects on it so it would give the synth line more of a warm and wobbly feeling, and that sounds like this. So I used a standard synth that you can find in Cubase and made my own sound, which I thought would fit very much in my tune. And then of course, I sound shaped it a little, compressed it, and used a kind of a dynamic filtering for giving the synth this kind of emotion that's making the synth louder and softer, so like a vibrato. That gives the synth a nice feel, I think. If I deactivate it, you can hear the difference. Then this feeling of the synth that seems to move in the rhythm of the tune is gone. And it's also not very loud, so in the second verse there's just a slight change. This track is a house-like EDM track, and there as well I wanted to show you some ideas of how I arranged and wrote and produced this track. So there is basically like two ideas that are shown in this track, and it is called light versus dark, and therefore I had a spoken phrase that was called into the light and another one that was called into the darkness. And from time to time you can see these phrases would show up, and then the track would change slightly from a brighter feel to a darker feel. And the bright feel is really basic. It has a chord pad sound, and I think this is around the time when I at first played that idea for the listener, and that is the light feel. So, and at the end you hear like this stop that you all know from electronic music, and then the vocals would go like into the darkness, and I cut this phrase up and used a vocal synth to shape the sound so it would give this robotic and kind of mysterious sound, and it would give a good preview of what would happen next. So the vocals go like into the darkness, and then the track changes from this sound to and I thought that would sound much darker, so every time that kind of phrase appears in the track, the vocals would like announce it. In that part I have a basic drum and bass sound like this. I sidechained the bass so that it would give this typical house feeling with a pumping note, and for the melody, which is not actually a melody, I used two synth sounds which evolve over time. So One is just a very long sounding note that lays the background, and the other one is kind of a melody, if you want to say so, and I automated it so at first you would hear very little of that instrument, and over some times and some repetitions this element slowly comes in a little bit more and more, like so. So, and at this point, the dark would go back slightly to the light, but not at one point, so just over time, and therefore I played in the pad chords again and also used a slightly lighter sound to play some part of the main melody, which goes like... You could hear that when I started playing the song that it sounded weird for some beats because I used several delays and also modulations for the synth, which is synchronized in time. And at one point, if you don't start it at the right beat, then it would sound weird because I have synchronized it over a whole bar. And when you start the tune in the middle of the bar, then the synchronizing would obviously be at the wrong moment in time and sound weird. The melody is being played and then there is a slight break and it goes back to a little bit darker, but not completely like here in the beginning where it was very dark. It goes back to like a mixture of both, and from there on the mixture stays a mixture between light and dark, but evolves a little bit more to the light side until the end. And that sounds like this. So that is basically the dark sound, but it has a little bit of the light sound in it as well, so it sounds brighter than before. And then I played the two parts of the light sound completely, but also they're automated and evolve over time, so when I repeat it 3 times in the end it wouldn't get too boring. So that is the idea with this tune.